of our GELILT talks. GELILT is our research group here at the University of the State of Bahia. We are very pleased to have this live event today with Dr. Martin Mullen, who is speaking from Scotland. I suppose it's quite cold there at the moment. So I'm so very, very, very thankful to Martin. He is a lecturer in English and TESOL at the University of the West of Scotland in the UK. He will correct me if I'm wrong. And he's the program leader for the Masters in TESOL. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. But I think that there was a slight delay according to Joabe. So maybe you can start again. I don't know.
Okay. So, yeah. Joabe, let me know when I can start. Perhaps I can already?
Yeah, yes. He says you can go. Yeah.
Okay, so good evening again, everyone. I was here talking to myself, thinking I was online already. So I'm here talking from Brazil, and our speaker will be talking to us from Scotland. This is one more of our GELILT talks. GELILT is our study group at the University of the State of Bahia. We are very pleased to have this speaker today. Martin Mullen, is a lecturer in English and TESOL at the University of the West of Scotland in the UK. He's the program leader for the Masters in TESOL, and his research interests center on computer-assisted language learning, CALL, learner and teacher attitudes to technology, which I think will be quite useful for us today, and more specifically on the roles of the various devices, the roles that the various devices can play in supporting informal language learning. So I was thinking that this might be of great interest to student teachers and to teachers, also to learners, just learners. I think Martin can talk a little bit more about this himself. Hello, Martin.
Hello. So I am hoping that everyone can hear and see me okay. I don't think there's any way for me to know. So if there's a problem, I'm sure that Joabe will tell me. So I'm just going to continue. And if there's a problem, he will let me know. So it's nice to meet you all online. Thank you very much to Dr. Carvalho for inviting me to speak. I'm always pleased to meet TESOL students, and especially I'm pleased to meet TESOL students from a different part of the world. Here in Europe, we tend to work a lot with other people in Europe, and it's nice to meet people from South America, and hopefully later when we are having a question and answer session, I can learn a little bit about you as well. And even during this presentation, I have a short survey for you to complete, which will give me some ideas about your attitudes and readiness for technology in the language classroom. So the plan for today is, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself very quickly. As introduced, I'm a lecturer in TESOL, and I'm the program leader for the MEd TESOL program. My PhD was all about smartphones. It was an investigation of learner perceptions of smartphones as tools of language learning. So what do students actually think about using their smartphones for learning? And that was a few years ago. These days, I am probably more interested in what teachers of English think about using smartphones as tools of language learning. And as well as working at UWS, I am also involved in Eurocall, the European Association for Call, and I'm particularly involved with the Mobile Assisted Language Learning Special Interest Group. If you're interested in reading any of the things that I have published, you can find them on this link. You can check my research output. It's almost all about technology and mobile technology. So the plan for today, to start with a brief history of CALL and the three main stages of computer-assisted language learning. I think it's important to give you some background as to how this situation has developed, particularly if you want to do research in this area, you'll need to understand this. Then we'll talk about what kind of devices we are talking about today, because that's very different from 50 years ago. Then we'll look at some resources, just a handful of resources for practicing call inside the language classroom. And then I'll talk about something which I'm particularly interested in, which is the use of call to help our learners learn beyond the classroom, in what's sometimes called the digital wilds, when they're not supervised by anyone. And then at the end, of course, there will be time for questions and answers. But before we do this, I'd like to take 1 minute, and now I'd like to ask Joabe to distribute into the chat this survey. This is a Google document which I have created. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to open and answer the survey. I'll show you the survey here while the link is being prepared. There are only 5 questions, and they're all pretty much the same structure. I am confident in my ability to use various devices, such as laptops, tablets, smartphones, as part of my own language learning. And you can strongly agree, mildly disagree, and strongly disagree. The next one is, I'm confident in my ability to use various devices for language teaching purposes. And you have the same answers. I have a good knowledge of which language learning apps are best for learning English. Same options. I have a good knowledge of which language learning websites are best for learning English. And finally, I have a good knowledge of which social media accounts are best for learning English. So please take a minute or two to answer those questions. And we will check the combined data later. Okay, I think that's probably enough time. If you haven't quite finished, you can continue to do the survey while I am speaking, because they're easy answers to complete, I think. So let's move on to the next slide. And I'd like to talk about a brief history of call. So the use of computers in language education begins really in the 1960s, and it's traditionally been divided into 3 main stages, both in terms of technological advancements and also pedagogical approaches. So the first phase of call was called behavioristic call, a part of the behavioristic approach to learning in general. Computers were not common. This learning took place in language labs. Perhaps a university had only 1 or 2 language labs. And it was pretty boring stuff. It was typically drill and practice activities where you repeated things over and over and over again and moved language around in different ways. And the student was interacting with a computer who was just a mechanical tutor who never got tired. But it was a very simple form of language learning, something more similar to grammar translation than communicative language teaching. And that is the next stage, communicative call. Technologically, new personal computers were creating greater possibilities for individual work. And the new approach to language learning was communicative language learning, a focus on communicative activities rather than just the structure of the language. And in this kind of call, people were working with other people as well as with a computer. In the late 80s or the early 90s, a new form of call came about, integrative call. Again, we started to have devices which were multimodal, multimedia. Later on, there was the internet available. And pedagogically, there was a switch from a cognitive view of communicative teaching to a more social or socio-cognitive view. More of an emphasis on authentic language, authentic contexts, to prepare people for life outside the classroom. And this is where we are at the moment in call. But just because we are now in integrative call, that doesn't mean that the older elements have disappeared. You can still see elements of all three call approaches in lots of different technologies. Especially in online materials, behavioristic call is all over the place. Here is a screenshot from the most popular language learning app in the world, and I'm learning Spanish on this app. So this is the kind of thing which students did in language labs nearly 60 years ago. Moving around language and translating at the same time. So very much behavioristic call. And here's another screenshot from Duolingo. I have been studying with Duolingo for nearly 1 year. And about 2 months ago, this was the question that they asked me. Can I select the correct image? Which one of these 4 images is la pizza? So this might give you some idea of the quality of some very big and very successful language learning apps. Just because they're big and successful doesn't always mean that they are pedagogically sound. So this is where we are today. We have in many classrooms a range of devices, internet connectivity. So many things are possible, but not everywhere. So we need to think about what devices we are talking about. And I don't know your future teaching contexts as TESOL students in Brazil. Perhaps some of you will travel to different countries to teach. I'm sure that some of you will stay in Brazil to teach. And in Brazil, my research has suggested that, or not my research, other people's research, which I found, suggests that most Brazilians access the web only through their smartphone. 58% of Brazilians use only a smartphone. So even though we talk about lots of devices, we have to consider the reality of our learners. Another statistic here, that mobile internet usage in Brazil, at the moment, just over 1 in 5 Brazilians does not have a smartphone. That will slowly change over the next few years. But for some of you, your learners won't always have access to all of the technology which exists. So just a reminder that this technology is not everywhere. Access could be limited, it could be unequal. And this is something that you must consider when you are working in the TESOL field, when you're designing your syllabus, your lesson material, your classroom activities, your homework activities. Keep this in mind. People like me here in Western Europe have access to whatever we want, but that is not worldwide. So always consider the needs and the reality of your teaching context and your learning environment. So with that warning in mind, let's move on to some of the I believe, very positive things about call. We'll start with call in the classroom, and I can only give you a small number of resources today. We could spend hours and hours going through various websites. I'm just going to mention some which I think are interesting and also useful in different ways. So some resources, call resources such as desktops, projectors, internet, they are more or less normalized in some parts of the world. We don't even really think of them as technology anymore. They're not any more technology than a pen or a pencil. Although, of course, this is not the case everywhere. Some of my students here in Scotland are from parts of the world where they struggle to have reliable internet access or even reliable electricity. So they are not going to be as passionate about call as I am, because they have more immediate learning needs. But having said that, I'll introduce a few resources that I find helpful and helpful in various ways. And I've got a range of tabs up across the top of my screen here, which I'm going to go through. So first of all, it's just a website. It's just a PDF, which is available online, but any English language teacher should be aware of what the Longman 3000 is. I hope you are already. If not, the Longman 3000 list is a computer-generated list of the 3,000 most frequently used words in both written and spoken English. They are divided into written and spoken, and they are divided by which band they fit. So, for example, acceptable is in both spoken 3000 and written 3000. Age is at the very top, spoken 1000, written 1000. If you are thinking about which words your learners should be learning, this is a very good place to start. It's hard to find good online collocation dictionaries. This is the best one I have ever found. Collocations is something which are really, really important for your learners. Not just learning individual words, but the words which combine with these words to make typical language units. So this is called OSDIC. I'm just going to put in the word culture here. And when we put in culture, it gives us examples of the words which come before culture. It gives us examples of the verbs that come with culture. Culture plus verb, culture plus noun, prepositions, adjectives. So a very, very useful resource for you as teachers to make sure that you are teaching the right word combinations. I'm not sure how many people have heard of Sketch Engine. This is not a free product. You have to pay for this. It's corpus linguistic software, but there are some parts which are free. So let me bring this up. And I'm going to put in the word capital. So it searches the internet for uses of the word capital. I can see example sentences. I can see a word sketch, the verbs with capital as a subject, the verbs with capital as an object, the adjectives with capital. So even for someone like me who obviously uses academic English quite a lot, this is an invaluable resource to help me understand the best way to combine words. For you as language learners and teachers, it's also invaluable. Google Sites are something that I would encourage every teacher to become familiar with. They're free. They will always be there. And you can use them by yourself or you can use them with your students. Here is a site which I have made. This was for a class of mine at the University of Limerick in Ireland a number of years ago. So I have my homepage, I have my syllabus up here, I have my course materials, and I have my resources and links. So I could share whatever I wanted to with the students so that we didn't have to use another learning management system. We could just use a Google site designed particularly for this class. So that's something I designed and I was the owner of. But many years ago, when I worked in Japan, I've been interested in learner autonomy for a long time. So this is a student of mine, Daisuke Suzuki. And you can see that we used Google Sites to help him share his language learning journey. So he had his language learning history, where he talked about his experiences of learning English. He also had some learning links where he put up places that he used English, and reflections. So each week we did something in the classroom and he would reflect on this. And I'm going to come back to reflections later. It's very, very important for you as teachers and for your students to reflect on every part of your teaching, but especially your use of technology, to make sure that you refine and improve so it can be a better experience next time. Just a couple more. This one, which has taken over the whole world almost in the past year or so. So I am a big fan of ChatGPT. And I'm just going to create a new chat here. And I'm going to say, create a 300-word gap fill exercise about politics for intermediate learners of English. And ChatGPT will do it. So it gives me the words and it gives me the gaps, and what will take a human 10 or 15 minutes to do, ChatGPT or other AI will do in a matter of seconds. If I ask it to create an interactive game that focuses on the simple past tense, it will do it. And not only that, it will have the objective, it will have the instructions, and then you fill in the blanks. So ChatGPT is something that every language teacher can think about using as part of their preparation for class, but also in class. This is something that students, you can be sure students are already using it. So we should be helping them to use it effectively. Just one more resource for in the classroom, especially the online classroom, Padlet. So I'd like to ask Joabe to share this second link now, the Padlet link. And I have set you a little task here. This task is, please list 2 ways in which ChatGPT could be used in the classroom. So I've just shown you a little bit, a very little bit of what ChatGPT can do. I'd like you to please click on here and you just type in whatever you want to say, and then you click on publish. So I'm going to give people just a minute to do this. So Padlet, I'm doing this also to show you what Padlet looks like, because Padlet can be a very useful tool for collaboration and for sharing ideas inside the classroom or for homework. So hopefully I will be able to get some responses from people. So let me just wait a minute and see if this is possible. Okay, I can see a couple of people are typing. You don't have to give big, long answers. I would just like for everyone to see what it looks like when it's published. Okay, someone loves horses. Thank you very much. There's something a bit more on topic. Okay, so I think people can see the idea. You can continue to type and answer. The Padlet doesn't go anywhere. It will always be there. But you can see that you could collect information from a lot of students, and each person can see what other people have said. So Padlet is another, yes, someone said helpful with tests as well. Absolutely. So Padlet is another useful tool, a free tool, although you can pay for extra functionality. Okay, so these are just some examples of Cole resources that I find useful in the classroom. I think they're good for, first of all, most importantly, building knowledge, helping learners improve. But as well as that, you can use these things in various ways for collaboration, helping learners become more autonomous, just for variety in the classroom. It doesn't always have to be a pen and paper and a textbook. At the same time, students are building their digital literacy. They're becoming more comfortable using online resources. And they are building a range of language learning resources which they can use outside the classroom. Some of these, such as Padlet, could be very useful for the online classroom, where you might be having a live class, synchronous class, but it's online. And it can be used as a kind of a blackboard as well. So I encourage you, as language learners and teachers, to experiment with various resources and analyze their potential for classroom use. As well as learning in the classroom, something which is becoming much more discussed these days is learning beyond the classroom. The idea that the language teacher should just focus on teaching English as best they can for 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, that attitude is changing, and it's being replaced by the idea that one of the most important roles of teachers is to help students build the skills and the knowledge to learn by themselves beyond the classroom. Your students might spend 2 or 3 hours a week in class with you, but they will spend, 50, 60, 80 hours a week watching TV or listening to music or using the internet by themselves. So if we as teachers can help to shape the way that they spend their time outside the classroom, we can help them be exposed to a lot more language. Stockwell argues that our time as teachers with students, it's something that can transform the way that learners engage in language learning, possibly for the rest of their lives. We need to equip them with the skills, the knowledge, and the resources so they will continue in their learning throughout their lives. And Robert Godwin Jones talks about personal learning environments, spaces in which lots of devices can be used in a way which will accommodate individual L2 needs and preferences. Different learners have different needs and preferences. They can construct their own environment where they are surrounded by resources which will help them. But in order to do this, teachers need to be digitally literate ourselves. We need to be able to support our students. And often teachers struggle to do this. Across the world, call preparation in teacher training courses is generally inadequate, insufficient. Students are often not prepared well enough, and as a result, they don't do it in the class. So later, at the end of the presentation, I'm going to go back to the survey and see what answers you gave to my questions. Do you feel prepared? Do you feel ready? And I'm just going to show you a few more apps and other resources. Some of these are dedicated language learning materials. They're designed for language learning. We've already talked about language learning apps such as Duolingo, other apps such as Memrise or Busuu. There are also some language learning websites. Hi Native is a website where you can post questions and other native speakers of the language will answer your question. So this is a Japanese student asking a question about English. Here's a Russian student asking a question about English. I can click on this and I can answer the question. So you can use this as language learners. And of course, if you find someone who is a native English speaker who wants to learn Portuguese, you can build a community which helps each other. Lyrics Training is a website where you can learn English through lyrics. Now, unfortunately, it's not possible for me to play the sound, but there's an Ed Sheeran video. And if I play the video, you can see what's happening anyway. You have to wait for the ad to finish. But this song plays. And now the song has stopped and I have to fill in the words to the song before I can continue to the next line. So if someone is very interested in music, this is a way that they can combine their love of music and language learning. So these are just a couple of the dedicated language learning materials. But as well as dedicated language learning materials, there are also repurposed language learning materials. Twitter is one of the best sites you will ever find for language learning. Facebook also. There's lots of information on TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, music, incredible resources. I'm going to share with you, I've saved over the last week this is my bookmarks. So as students, if you want to find out how to do academic research posters, here's the English Clinic talking about prepositional phrases. Here's a video about formative assessment versus summative assessment. Some information about idioms. Okay, here is a bunch of TikTok videos about learning English. I'm not on TikTok. I have to be honest and say I haven't watched these, but learning English doesn't have to be something which is outside the rest of your life. You can combine these things. And we as teachers should be training students or making them aware of all of these resources. And this can happen in the classroom. Have them practice in the classroom. Your classroom should be a place of shared experimentation with different resources and shared reflection, where they talk about what they did, whether they liked it or not, what were the positives and negatives. They can share this information with each other. Many people, including students, still have the idea that teaching English is with a textbook and you focus on grammar. As teachers, we need to broaden people's perceptions of what language learning can be. There's a world of resources out there, and we need to get people using them more than they do. Okay, so in conclusion, as language learners, we can harness technology to ensure that we have an access to a regular stream of relevant, authentic content. If you're a football fan, you follow football profiles on Twitter or social media, other social media, and you get regular content, which you can contribute to, you can post. And you're speaking with native speakers of that language and also other language learners of that language. As language teachers, we can help shape and improve our learners' classroom experiences through careful use of technology. And as language teachers, we have the opportunity, and I would argue the responsibility, to help our learners develop the resources and skills which they will need to help them learn effectively beyond the classroom. So the order is wrong here. So really, there are no magic resources, just various resources which will suit an individual learner's needs and preferences. I encourage you, please keep exploring, experimenting, reflecting. Find out what works best for your learners. And just as importantly, improve your own students' abilities to explore and experiment and reflect and learn what works best for them, to equip them with the skills to learn outside the classroom. So thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation. You can email me at this email address if you have any other questions, or you can follow me on Twitter or X if that's something that you might be interested in. This is my list of references here, and I will wait now for any questions. And I will ask, should I stop sharing now or should I keep sharing during the question and answer session?
If you still need to share something, yeah, you can.
Okay.
There are some questions popping up here. I believe that Joabi has probably written down some, because as I was following the chat, some questions were popping. Oh, sorry, some questions were there, but then it just quickly runs up on YouTube, and then I got a little bit lost.
Okay,
really.
sure.
But I do have one here from Jamili. Pardon the other ones that came first, and I'm sorry, but I will go with Jamili's first, okay? So she asks, how do you normally assess your TESOL students as for making use of devices such as Padlet?
So is the question assess or access?
It's actually assess, but I think it was just misspelled.
Okay, all right. I mean, I think Padlets could be at any level. I mean, the students were able to do it, I think, today. Some of them were able to do it. So all you need is a link. They need a device and they need a link to that device. So I think maybe I'm misunderstanding the question here, but
I suppose Jamili wants to know, as a lecturer at the university, you have your TESOL students. So how do you assess their progress in using these things?
okay, I don't think that I would use Padlet as a particularly something for assessment. This might be just a different way to get feedback. Rather than them completing their homework in a Word document, for example, I might set them a Padlet, and then everyone will be able to see what everyone else has read.
Right.
And they can learn from each other in terms of the different answers, which everyone will be able to see. Of course, Padlet has limitations. Certainly for an assessment, I would not use Padlet because everyone will be able to see what everyone else has said. And then
I think she meant how you would be sure that they are able to use it already, something like that. Not only maybe for Padlet, but other devices. Like today, you finished your wonderful lecture about some different things that can be used for students to learn by themselves and also to be used by teachers, right? English teachers.
Sure.
So I suppose you would like to know how you would assess your TESOL students.
Yeah, I mean, my own TESOL students, I can see that every one of them has a laptop in the class and every one of them has a smartphone. So I would check something like that before I start to assign work using technology. As I said, here in Scotland, it's not something that is a major issue, but it could be. More of a concern would be things like privacy. Some students may not want to do this publicly. They may not want to give opinions, particularly if they feel that their English is of a slightly lower level than some of the other students in the class, and they don't wish to comment publicly because they might be a little bit embarrassed. And you have to respect that. You can't force someone to do this. If you start to force them, you turn them off technology.
Now, Martin, if you are curious now, I think that this could be the moment that you could go to the YouTube screen if you want, because I know that when a speaker is talking, he will not be able to be looking at different screens at the same time. But if you are curious at how it looks at the moment, you can have a look.
But please, if someone can put in the link, I will open it for sure. I actually don't have the link to the YouTube channel, I think.
All right. So
maybe I have it, but I have lost it somewhere. There we go. Thank you. So I can open this up. Let me open this up.
Let me see. I am a little bit lost with the first questions, but if Joabi can help us to copy and paste maybe to our private chat. Let me see if I've got another question here. As Jamili asked that question, I was really interested in how I could do this too, because we are also working with future language teachers at the university. So I was also curious about how to use this.
Okay, so I can see the questions now. Sally has asked, okay, no, that's just, thank you. Okay, so Mateus has, which app do you use most often for those people who don't know anything about the English language? My first suggestion would be to just get them to use any app or any website. Duolingo starts at a very, very basic level. So I think just getting them to become familiar with any app or any website. Practice. How did you feel about it? Was it useful? And then if it was, continue on. If not, use something else. It's not about getting very good at one app or one website and relying on one thing. It's about practicing with a range of things.
I was particularly interested when you in some parts of your speech. I think that it very much goes in accordance to what people particularly like. If they are, you mentioned, if you are interested in football, you will be looking at things related to football, and you will be able to interact with your English. I think this is really the way to go with working, using all this technology and everything, because we don't want to be imposing themes, imposing to students what they should be reading, what they should be doing. So I quite like the idea of working with the you go for what you are interested in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think this is something which I'm a big believer in this, but I'm also a realist about this. Mm-hmm. Many students will resist this kind of thing. In my own PhD, I found that for many students, smartphones and social media are an escape from study. They will study using a computer or a textbook, and when they've studied for long enough, they say, okay, no more study. Now I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to listen to music or play a game, or I'm going to do something else. And then I come along and say, oh no, you should use your smartphone for learning, and they just want to tell me to go away. This is their device to escape learning, right? So you will find resistance to this from students and also from teachers. Teachers don't want to be involved in smartphones because they don't know very much about them or about the resources. And also students have this idea that sometimes students have the idea that learning is a very narrow focus. You sit down with a book, a textbook or a grammar book or a computer. If you use a device, it's a laptop. And this is how you study. This is real study. And what happens on a smartphone is kind of study, but not really. And if that's the attitude that they have, then they won't learn very much because they are not really in the right mental state to learn from their smartphones. So this is why I say we need to broaden people's ideas of what and where and how learning can take place.
That's excellent tip. By the way, I have to start planning on using a little bit more of this in the classroom with my students. I thank you so very much for this talk today. I really need to follow the chat again to see if there are any more questions. Maybe Joabi will.
So Elaine, I think, has asked, how do you encounter an unexpected behavior from using ChatGPT in class? I think it's important not to rely very much on ChatGPT. I use it with my students, but anything which ChatGPT produces, I will have them copy and paste into a Word document, and then they will refine it so that it is, in the end, it is their words and not ChatGPT. ChatGPT can put some structure together, but they need to have the final control over what it says in terms of the language that's used and also in terms of the facts. And remember that ChatGPT doesn't understand anything. All it does is harvests information from the internet. So when I ask ChatGPT to create an interactive lesson plan about the past tense, it just takes that from somewhere. Okay, it's not really inventing anything.
Perhaps I know the reason why this person is asking this question, because I do know this participant. She has also been to the University of Limerick as one, just not really as a regular student, but as a visitor. She is talking to us from Paris now. And she has produced, perhaps she could correct if I'm wrong, perhaps she could write it down there. She has created a software for dealing with, it's a corpus linguistic annotation system. I'm not sure if I'm really explaining it well. To deal with Korean, if I'm not mistaken. I suppose she will correct me there. You know that we have a little delay, between our talk here and the transmission to YouTube, a little delay. So maybe she will write it down there. Any other questions?
Just one from Seoul, which says how to improve my intermediary English. I have been finding that really hard to do because it feels like you're stuck after reading the intermediary. I feel quite stuck right now. This is not a question that technology can answer. This is a question that finding materials, including technological materials that interest you and motivate you is one of the things that can get you out of this rut, I think. It depends what particularly is the issue that stops you from progressing as well. But I would just encourage you to find something in English that you enjoy doing. And often when people have a problem, such as a grammar problem, they really focus hard on that grammar problem. But that's not a particularly enjoyable way to study English. It will make you just hate grammar, probably. So find something that you can, even if you're not studying, you're just using English. Find material that you just want to read, that you want to watch, that you want to listen to. Forget about learning for a while. Just expose yourself to something in English that you enjoy. And start to enjoy English being around you.
To be more immersed in it. I see.
I think that's it. Elaine
I think that's it, but it's very short time. It's just flying. I'm afraid that the presentation in itself, I would like to see more, because I'm sure there would be other devices. I think you asked me if you should work with something, with some software, but you were not sure if it would be something allowed to be used at the university here. But I cannot.
That's ChatGPT.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, because ChatGPT has it's quite powerful as an essay writing tool. So students already know this, I am sure. It's not a question of whether it's allowed, it's a question of whether they are using it. And many of them are, I'm sure.
All right. As for music, when you gave some tips on what to use, you were more focused on the lyrics. Yeah, something like more to focus on words and everything. We have at UNEB some events at the university, some events involving music, and one particular event that's been successful is what we call immersion day. So in the immersion day, we try to offer activities more or less in the way you mentioned there, of getting yourself involved with something freely. Forget a little bit about learning. I would like very, very, very much to work with something a little bit more with you, maybe in another occasion, if we have the chance. So you could offer us something short, really, like this, to offer during our immersion day, which will be probably very soon.
Well, I mean, if you let me know what you're looking for and the timing, maybe it's possible.
Right, because I felt like some of the things you used could be extended a little bit more. I wanted more of it, but time is not allowing us.
Well, but again, you will have the PowerPoint. So, of course, I hope that people will take some of these resources and will just use them by themselves. Absolutely. I encourage people to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Martin. It was lovely. I would like to remind everyone also that tomorrow we have another live event with Dr. Frida Mission. I will be sending everyone the card and everything. As for Martin, thank you so much. Also, thank you to our monitor, Joabi. Thanks to everyone watching. And this was, I wish we had more time, really.
Okay, so just a final comment for me. Thank you to everyone who attended and who asked questions. I hope it was useful and interesting for you, and I hope you have some new resources to practice with as a learner and as a teacher. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, take care.